know what the word spirituality means because it's given so many definitions by so many people. I could define it and then there'd be one more definition. But I think that there are things that science is really good for and really applies to, and that's explaining the natural world. But it's also the case that even though pretty much all human beings are concerned with the natural world in some way. I mean, you've got to grow your crops, or you worry about whether it's going to rain for your daughter's wedding next weekend. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we're interested in the natural world. But we're also interested in a lot of other things that don't really have to do with matter and energy as we understand it when we're studying the natural world. Now, ultimately, things like emotions, love or fear or anger or delight or awe, these kinds of things have material causes, certainly. I mean, the love that I would feel for my daughter or the awe that I feel when I go down Grand Canyon and see the beautiful sight down there. Yes, I can explain that through synapses in my brain firing and matter and energy kinds of explanations. But what really matters is the meaning of those experiences. And that's something that's really outside of what science actually deals directly with. And if I have to use the S word, which I avoid, to me, these non-scientific issues, for which we don't really have a word, spirituality or otherwise, are those kinds of things. The things that give human life meaning. For many human beings, the idea of purpose of life, either an immediate purpose, what is the purpose of my life? Is there a cosmic purpose to the universe? Is there an ultimate meaning to everything? Is there small m meaning to small things? Those are the kinds of things that many people consider spiritual if they do come from a non-supernatural tradition. If you stand in a street corner and say, "Boy, evolution is a really exciting scientific idea," people will just snore on by. The reason why the creationists are so good at getting attention is that they stand up on the corner and say, "Scientists are lying to you about evolution." That gets people's attention. What we on the pro-science side of things have to do is think about the ways that science affect people where it's important to them, which is in their emotions. Now one way is to encourage the awe and wonder of science, which is certainly there and definitely something that I love to talk about. I hope that I can communicate some of that wonder and get people interested in science that way. But there's also very practical ways of helping people understand that science really is important. Most people are concerned about health. Their own health, the health of their loved ones. Well, science is going to help keep you and your loved ones healthier longer, because this method of science in which we test our explanations and we keep the ones that work and we keep refining them and we keep getting better and better at them are the ways that we really do improve our means of taking care of people who are sick or who are debilitated in some ways. You might like to eat, in which case you should know that science is what is bringing you the new varieties of foodstuffs that perhaps can be grown in arid areas or areas where maybe there's too much salt on the soil and ordinarily you can't grow food there, because we need to grow more food. The planet's getting more and more people in it every year, and so there are more mouths to feed. And so if you're concerned about human welfare, concerned about people getting enough to eat, you should be concerned about what science is doing. And there are a lot of different ways like this that we need to point out to people in a way that affects their hearts and their guts, shall we say, that science is a really important thing. Science also affects your brain, but you hook people by hitting their heart and their gut, and then you can work on the brain. if anything, it increases the awe and the wonder and the excitement that you might feel for some of these kinds of non-material phenomena for which we don't have a word, but we don't want to use the word spiritual. This is the unweaving the rainbow kind of idea. When Newton showed that you can break white light down into a spectrum of colors, some people were very upset because this implied that the rainbow somehow was stripped of its beauty and wonder. Not at all. If nothing else, you increase the wonder of what the human brain and human ability, human soul, if that's your word, is capable of. So think of it as an added source of wonder rather than stripping the wonder away. If they have children, that's one very important contribution that they can make. They can expose their children to science, especially when they're very young. And no, don't make them memorize the periodic table. That's not what I'm talking about. Take them on walk. Take them into the backyard. Lie down in the backyard with them and look for bugs in the grass. I mean, there's lots and lots of things that you can do to increase a child's observational abilities. People don't automatically see things when they go out in nature. You have to train your eye to look for the shadows and the movement and the little bugs in the grass. And so start off that way. If you have a kid, see if you can interest, and it doesn't take much to interest a kid in nature. And then you can build on that interest to help that student, that child of yours, understand nature. If you don't have kids of your own, well, there's lots of girls who would love to be in Girl Scout troops. Maybe there's no leader. I was a Girl Scout leader. There's a lot of boys who would love to be in Scout troops. That's a great way to get kids into science, and through these kinds of organizations that bring children together in groups like that. We did a lot of science in my Girl Scout troop. You can also volunteer at your local school. There's hardly any public school, and private schools too, that can't use an extra set of hands someplace along the line. Most teachers need some sort of assistant to maybe read with the students who need a little bit of extra help and understanding things. Well, some of that reading is going to be science books, or you bring in some books that are science books. And there's all sorts of ways of working science into the world of a child. And if you aren't interested in kids or aren't any good at kids, there are things you can do also. Your local museum, science center, zoo, aquarium, there's probably some organization or institution in your local community that could use a volunteer. And that's a good way to help bring science to people also. The question, if man evolved from apes, why are there still apes? Or more likely, if man evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? That is about the second or third most common question I get, like on talk radio. I mean, that idea is out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that these people reject evolution, but they clearly don't know very much about it. The way to handle that question is to point out to the person that, well, I think somebody's misled you a bit on what evolution actually is. We didn't evolve from apes. We and apes shared a common ancestor. This is like saying you evolved from your brother. Why is your brother still here? Well, that's a silly question because you didn't evolve from your brother. You and your brother are descended from your dad. That's the idea. We and apes are descended from a common ancestor. If it's man evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Well, that's sort of like saying you evolved from your cousin. You didn't evolve from your cousin. You and your cousin shared a common ancestor in your granddad. And this idea of evolution as this branching and splitting common ancestry idea is something that the public really doesn't get. There's, digress a little bit. You don't have to use this in the video.
Go for it.
But to digress a little bit, the idea of man evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys, is based on this very old, really ultimately medieval idea, or even Aristotelian idea of a great chain of being, that there's this ladder of life of greater and greater complexity of organisms through time. And so monkeys evolved into humans, and yet they're still monkeys, so clearly this couldn't have happened. It's the idea that all monkeys evolved into humans, which, is just not what evolution is. It's the idea of common ancestry. We shared a common ancestor with monkeys. We didn't evolve from them. Questions of meaning and purpose, things like that don't neatly fit into something that's explained by science or that science can really add anything to. Those kinds of issues, you have to deal with philosophy or religion. There are many philosophical traditions, there are even more religious traditions, there are many theological traditions. All of these deal with these kinds of issues of purpose and meaning. And somebody who is interested in these kinds of questions really isn't going to get the answers from science. You're going to get them from looking at one or more of these traditions. My personal view is a humanist philosophy, a non-supernaturalist philosophy. But there are very thoughtful views on purpose and meaning in some of these other ideas that can be found across both religious as well as non-religious philosophical traditions.